We left our spot in Shima Yacht Harbor early to start our trip to Shimoda. After many months of stillness, it was nice to be out on the water. Pinot too enjoyed the ride. We arrived in Shimoda early the next day, at the same time as our friends Anya and Thomas from Robusta. They too were planning on exiting the country from here, as the port was open. The same couldn't be said of other ports near Tokyo.
Overly cold, but it's very salty. Fucking algae, man.
We didn't stay on the pontoon long, but before we moved, we cleared some seaweed that had wrapped around our prop. Then, we rafted with Robusta on a concrete wall alongside local fishing boats. We left Robusta and Pinot to socialize and went to explore the area. Shimoda was beautiful, surrounded by iconic hills. The city center was built around the harbor and had many parks and interesting structures. We took a ride on the ropeway to the top of Mount Nasugata to visit the resident koi and to better view the city and surrounding waters. Our time here was short, as we found a good weather window to leave. We left the dock on June 9th and pointed our bow toward Canada. The first 2 days were fantastic. It was sunny with 12 to 15 knot winds. We glided east fast, helped along by the strong black current that runs up the coast. We lost sight of Japan rapidly and went into offshore mode, taking turns at the tiller, inspecting produce for signs of rot, reading and sleeping a lot. We had many days of strong weather, followed by days of quiet, and this dance continued throughout the trip. Dolphins were frequent visitors. We saw many birds too.
There they go. Sorry, babies. Aw.
Many banks of bobbing birds.
I'm so sorry.
Although we suspect they didn't like us very much. On this trip, I kept a detailed logbook of all the happenings aboard Pinot. This occupied much of my time, and when I felt bored or down, I doodle in the margins. We released a transcript of the log for those interested. As I mentioned before, we had many days of bad weather. 1,000 nautical miles from Japan, Pinot was knocked down after a big wave leapt to board from the stern. We lost our Dodger and the flexi solar panel that was on it. Inside of the boat was chaos. Things we thought were well secured came leaping out of their spots, including a bottle of plum wine and of cooking oil. Both exploded and caused a great big mess. The plum wine wet the inside of the navigation table, soaking all of our charts. We did manage to dry them, and use them anyway to chart our position, even when they started to get moldy. Luckily, there was no significant damage to the rigging, engine, or sails. After this event, we pushed on. We had no Dodger to hide under, but found ways to stay comfortable. We hid in the cabin often, especially on days of rain or fog. While sailing south of the Aleutians, we stumbled into the biggest fishing fleet we'd ever seen. We had 44 targets on AIS, all huddled in together. We couldn't avoid them, as they occupied too much space, their bright lights burning into the clouds above. It was a horrifying sight. Luckily, our friend Bowie the albatross was always there to brighten our mood. It followed us for a long time, flying ahead and drifting past us before flying forward to drift past us again. Bowie was a welcome distraction, our loyal friend on this vast, lonely ocean. On this trip, everything aboard was wet always, us included. It was hard to stay warm, especially when there was fog. We had many days of low visibility with no wind to fill our sails.
Like bobbing just ahead of the boat. And I was trying to follow it as it was paddling like that way. I'd like to think it knew where the wind was, but I don't think it did. At the time, I thought maybe it was a good tactic. Turn nose. It must know. It's a bird, it wants wind.
Birds are on the water during such days, resting. And we did the same, conserving our energy. Whenever we'd get some sun, all of our clothes would go outside to dry. But keeping things dry afterwards was not a battle we could win. Not out here. After 51 days at sea, we arrived in Victoria. Pino and crew arrived back home, thusly completing a circumnavigation of the Pacific Ocean. We're happy to be home, and are looking forward to rediscovering this beautiful place. As always, thank you for keeping us afloat. Literally.